Thank you. Thank you very much. And welcome. I'm Father Mitch Pacwa, and welcome to Threshold of Hope, where we take a look at the writings of the church. And I just like to point out that one of the nice things about getting a national championship cap for the University of Alabama Crimson Tide is that you can use it over and over again. Just think of all the money you save when you're a Crimson Tide fan. But I digress. Today is also the feast of some Jesuit martyrs of the Reformation in Europe, especially Father Jacques Sallet and Brother Guillaume Saltemouche. They were obviously two French Jesuits, one a brother, the other a priest, who went back to a town that had returned to the Catholics from the Huguenots, and they were caught and martyred after they defeated their opponents in a debate. They were punished by being martyred. Also, I want to mention Father Ignatius de Azevedo and his 39 companions. They were on a ship on their way to Brazil to be missionaries there, and they were caught by a Huguenot Huguenot pirate who martyred them all by throwing them into the sea. There was one who was a novice, and the pirate said that if you want, you can just forsake Catholicism and I'll let you live. And he said, don't try to rob me of the gift of martyrdom. And he was thrown into the sea where all of them were drowned. Also, during the French Revolution, among the hundreds of thousands of Catholic martyrs were 14 Jesuits, including Father Joseph Imbert and Father John Nicolas Cordier, James Julius Bonnaud, and other Jesuits, 11 others. The French revolutionary government hated Catholicism, a hatred that they got from the French philosophers who came before them, Jean-Jacques Rousseau and a number of others. And it's interesting, it was, I believe, Voltaire who came up with the idea that religion is the biggest cause of war in history. And ironically, the French Revolution that came from his ideals led to the death of as many people in 25 years as had died in 2,000 years of Christian wars of religion and persecutions, say, including the Inquisition. So that they equaled it in 25 years because their godlessness and rejection of God made them more violent than religious people were. And this is something that continues on through the 20th century, of course, because in the 20th century, the 305 million people who died in atheistic and secular de-Christianized governments is 150 times as many people as died in wars of Christianity, including the Crusades. So always remember that. Speaking of dealing with various values and the importance of God, we are continuing on in Veritatis Splendor. You can get a paperback copy of that encyclical by St. John Paul II by going to EWTN's religious catalog, either online, it's EWTNRC.com, or you can call them 1-800-854-6316. Also, you can download, if you prefer, a free electronic copy of Veritatis Splendor by going to the document library of our website, EWTN.com. Go to the library, document library, and type in Veritatis Splendor, and you can highlight, when it comes up, you can highlight it and download it into your computer and read with us or print it out. Now, of course, we'd love to have you involved and participate in our show. You can come to Birmingham, Alabama, and be in our live audience, or you can send us a question by email by writing to threshold@ewtn.com, or you can call during our live broadcast, which is 1-800-221-9460. That's if you are in North America, 1-800-221-9460. Outside North America or inside Birmingham, it's 205-271-2980. And if you call from abroad, we will give you priority. All right, we are now in part 3 of this section of the encyclical. And in this, he speaks of fundamental choice and specific kinds of behavior. So to set the theme, as always, he likes to quote scripture. He looks at Galatians 5, verse 13, where St. Paul wrote, "For you were called to freedom, brethren. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love be servants of one another." That is a very important line, that you don't use freedom in the service of the flesh, but for love and virtue. And this is something that, as we think about Roe versus Wade anniversary coming up this week, that it's very important for us to remember that. The Supreme Court's decisions so emphasize freedom that love is neglected, as are the other virtues. But I digress. Let's go on to what Pope St. John Paul had to say. Paragraph 65, he begins, "Our own day has a heightened concern for freedom." Again, this is exactly what lies behind the Supreme Court decisions on contraception, abortion, and same-sex marriage. You are free to do whatever you want, and nobody can impinge on your freedom. And this has led many students of behavioral and theological sciences to try and develop a more penetrating analysis of the nature of freedom and of the dynamics of freedom. And this is very important because we should understand freedom in a world that so emphasizes freedom. We need to do that. And one of the questions to ask yourself, why is there such an emphasis on freedom? Ironically, because the various attempts by secular governments and atheistic philosophers to come up with a government without religion led to totalitarian governments. Of course, in fascist Spain, fascist Italy, National Socialist Germany, where they had a form of National Socialism, and of course communism in Soviet Union and Red China and all their satellite nations. And people became cogs in those machines of godless societies. And so rather than go to God, a number of philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre and others have reacted against totalitarianism by emphasizing freedom. People, as in our Supreme Court, are using the philosophy of Rousseau, so that the absolute freedom means nobody in society can impose anything on you. In the reaction to the totalitarian governments of the 20th century, absolute freedom has been proposed. And this is what motivates people in the social sciences and in theology to try and understand that freedom a little bit better. So we go on. It has been rightly pointed out that freedom is not only the choice for one action or another particular action. Freedom is also, within that choice, a decision about oneself. Your freedom helps to define who you are. And it's a setting for your life so that you make some basic decisions. Are you going to pursue what is good for the sake of the good? Are you going to pursue what is true and beautiful for the sake of truth and beauty? Or are you going to go only for yourself? Are you going to choose God or the self? I strongly urge people to read or reread St. Augustine's absolutely marvelous book called The City of God. You can download it from our website if you wish, into your computer. But in The City of God, he talks about there being two cities. The city of God, where you seek God, and that's you keep moving towards him, or the city of man, where you seek your own self. And he uses that distinction as a way to understand why the Roman Empire collapsed. It was a kingdom in which for centuries people sought themselves and their own glory instead of seeking the honor and glory of God. That's the choice. I recently heard that St. Louis University, a Jesuit school, somebody without much consultation has removed the motto of the Jesuits, for the greater glory of God. If they don't continue teaching at that university for the greater glory of God and seek their own glory or tenure or whatever else, then they will collapse like every other self-seeking enterprise collapses. The glory of God is what we do, and we can't ever deny that. Emphasis has been rightly placed on the importance of certain choices which shape a person's entire moral life. Sometimes a choice that you make at a certain stage affects you. When you begin to, say, go with a certain cynicism that nobody loves me, and therefore I won't love anybody. If they don't love me, I won't love anybody back. That becomes a core decision. And it begins a life of being a sociopath. This is something that must very much be kept in mind when we have certain choices. And certain choices are the bounds within which all the other choices of life can be situated and in which they develop. So if you choose yourself and say, I'm for me and for me alone, I don't care what anybody else does or thinks, that choice, not a feeling, that is a choice of self-love that will then exclude you not only from loving other persons, but also loving God. And of course, if you don't love other people or God, you won't love heaven, and you'll get the alternative. Some authors, however, have proposed something a bit more radical. Well, again, we agree that it's true. There are certain decisions that are very basic. Some authors take a radical revision of the relationship between a person and the actions that person does. In other words, they speak about a fundamental freedom, again, which we talked about. There is a fundamental freedom that makes a basic choice about life and is deeper than and is different from freedom of choice. It is that core decision to love. So, for instance, a husband and wife make a very deep decision to love each other. As they go through marriage, they make a number of other choices, some of which are good because they enhance that love, other of which are not good because they enhance one or other or both selfishness. So if a husband begins to think, well, you know, I deserve to buy myself a brand new car, a sports car, with only one seat in it, you know, disregarding what may be good for the education of the children, that would be a bad choice. But if he can also say, no, 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 I love my wife and children so much, I will not buy that. So it's not. So this is the core decision, to love your spouse and your children. But then you have constant choices to make. Do they deepen that love, or do they contradict the love? So that's one of the things. And some theologians, though, say that the only way to understand human actions correctly and evaluate them correctly is in terms of the fundamental choice. So according to certain authors, a key role in the moral life is to be attributed to the fundamental option, that is, the fundamental choice that a person makes. And it is brought about by that fundamental freedom whereby a person makes an overall self-determination. So for instance, again, using our example of husband and wife, a husband, says, I love my wife. And it doesn't really matter if I go ahead and buy myself that little sports car. It doesn't matter if I spend, and I was in an elevator at a convention once in which a man said, what am I going to tell my wife? I just spent $40,000 gambling. And he could say, oh, well, my wife knows that I love her, so she won't care. Yeah, try that when you get home. That becomes something of the problem for this theory, that they want to say the fundamental choice of loving your spouse is what really matters. And it does matter. But they sometimes seem to want to divorce the specific, concrete actions and specific choices away from that. They'll say, oh, that doesn't really matter, the specific choices. It's just that fundamental option to love that counts. And specific acts do not. And that these are not made, they'll say that the overall self-determination, how you define yourself, is not made through specific conscious decision as you think about it. But this is something that is transcendental. It's beyond who you are. And it's not thematic, it is athematic. That means it's not on a basic theme about just loving my wife even. It's just that I want to be a loving person. Particular acts which flow from this option would constitute only partial and never definitive attempts to express that fundamental option. So my buying flowers is not the meaning of my love for my wife. And, taking her out to dinner is not the core of my love for her. It is just something that gives expression. And they're only signs or symptoms of the love of a spouse. And there's a certain truth to that. The immediate object of such actions would not be absolute good and the choice for absolute goodness, before which the person would be expressed on a transcendental level. They're trying to say that, the overall love of your wife is transcendental. It's beyond any action. And if I happen to have a few drinks too many at the office Christmas party, and if I start kissing some other woman, well, my wife really won't mind, because she knows that on this basic, more transcendental level, she knows that I love her, and that wouldn't bother her. Oh yeah? Well, try sending her pictures of you kissing on some other woman and see how it doesn't matter. See, this is where the issue comes into play. And some theologians are trying to say that the specific action doesn't matter so much as the overall choice. They would say that the specific acts are particular goods. Sometimes they call it categorical goods. And in the opinion of some of these theologians, none of these specific particular good things, such as taking your wife out to dinner or buying her flowers, which by their nature are partial, none of those actions could determine the freedom of man as a person in his totality. So, starting to do something like kiss another woman a little passionately, or even more passionately, or beyond kissing, that is just a partial act. It really doesn't have much to do with the overall love of my wife. Even though it is only by bringing them about or refusing to do so that man is able to express his fundamental option. You see, that gets at the concrete. So that what we have to understand is that a husband's love for his wife is not just a basic decision he made when before he proposed, that got expressed in the proposal and in the marriage. But it's also something that shows itself up in the concrete everyday actions. Now, I'm using a relatively simple example of the love between a husband and wife, because we can understand that if a man said, I basically love my wife, but concretely, I'm going to be kissing on this woman or doing more than that. And my wife will totally understand because she knows I love her. I guarantee you, she will feel that your love has been betrayed. This is a totally different model of making decisions from Christian understanding and traditional philosophy. Because what we believe instead is precisely at those points where the option to do something wrong is presented to a person, when the option to go contrary to the act of love of a wife is presented to a man, a real man says, no, I don't kiss anybody but my own wife. I don't mess around with anybody, but I love my wife, because this is not about messing around. This is about giving myself in the concrete. I don't go buy cars for myself, but I think of my basic commitment to choose to do what is best for the whole family and not for my ego. That is where this idea of the fundamental option breaks down in terms of marriage, but also it applies to God. Well, I basically love God. See, this is what's behind all of those statements that people make. Oh, I'm a good person. I don't need to go to confession because I at least haven't committed murder. And it's trying to say, I'm basically oriented towards the good, but I don't bother to examine how my specific actions are leading me closer to God or not. Because and here's the difference. They're saying that your basic decision is for God, and your individual decisions don't change that. Whereas traditional theology says your basic decision may be for God, but as you go through life, a set of other decisions will keep coming up, and you have to make a choice because some of those choices will take you away from God, away from holiness, and away from virtue, and you will start walking another path. Whereas they say, no, it doesn't matter. Pope John Paul is saying it does matter. A distinction thus comes to be introduced. A distinction between the fundamental option and deliberate choices of concrete behavior. So in some of these authors, this division is not just a distinction. It's good to distinguish your basic choice and your concrete actions. But the problem is that some theologians have taken this to be a separation. And they limit, expressly on purpose, clearly they limit moral good and moral evil only to that most basic decision, that transcendent decision. Oh yes, I want to be good. And they don't take a look at the concrete. They want everything to be a fundamental option, and they describe right or wrong choices of the particular inner-worldly kinds of behavior, concerning behaviors that concern one's relationship with oneself, one's relationship with other people, and one's relationship with God and the material world. They call those, that's just inside the world here. It's not a transcendent decision. And the things you do with yourself, with other people, or with the material world don't really matter. So, yeah, you're a good person, and yeah, you may cheat or steal a little bit, but that just affects this world. Your basic decision is to be good. And the Pope is saying that separates your basic decision to be good from your concrete decisions to be bad. And this is not acceptable. It is not about authentic integrity. Even how you relate to yourself. It is easy for people to lie to themselves about themselves. You can make up things about yourself and start to believe it. This is a real danger. And that, they're saying, oh, no, you basically love the truth. It's just that you have some white lies about yourself. Well, there's no such thing as a white lie. It's something else that's going on. Thus, there appears to be established by these theologians within human acting a clear disjunction, not a distinction, but a disjunction. A disjunction means that you are going in two different directions. You know what a junction is? And a disjunction is when you come to a junction where two roads meet, and then they go off in different directions, or one road goes and then branches off. That's the disjunction, and that's what these people are dealing with. It is a disjunction that they have in their life on the levels of morality on one hand, they have the order of good and evil, which is dependent on the will. The other hand, going off in another direction, they have the specific kinds of behavior which they want to judge to be morally right or wrong only on the basis of technical calculation of the proportion between premoral or physical goods and evils that result from the action. In other words, they'll say, look, I'll try to break this down a little bit. It's complicated. But what the Pope is saying is, some people say, all right, here's your life. You're going along a path. You come now to a decision. You want to be basically good. That's one way. And then you have concrete, specific behaviors. So I choose to be married, and my choice to be married is this way, but my concrete behaviors of looking at pornography or going out on dates with other women and things like that, that doesn't matter except to them, except insofar as it might have some harm on my wife. They see that it does not affect my basic decision to love. But say if a man goes off with other women or with prostitutes, as an example, and catches a sexually transmitted disease, then they say, oh, well, it's bad if he gives that disease to his wife. That would make it bad. But he stayed with the same basic love of his wife. He just loves these other people on the way. And it doesn't matter in their mind. And the Pope is saying, no, that's not true. It does matter what you do concretely. And this disjunction, this going off from two directions, is not morally acceptable. Some theologians push it to a point where a concrete behavior, even one that is freely chosen, is seen as merely a physical process. So if a man looks at pornography and gets excited or something, well, you know, that's just physical. It doesn't matter. As opposed to saying, no, that is introducing a lack of dignity about the people I'm looking at in pornography, and it is an attack on my love for my wife. It does matter. And so this is a good example. The conclusion to which this eventually leads is that the properly moral assessment of the person is reserved only to his fundamental option. So we say, well, I choose to be good. Therefore, God will let you go to heaven. And that this prescinds or avoids, in whole or in part, particular actions. Yes, I choose to love my wife, but I've been fooling around with lots of other women. And it doesn't matter, because my love for her is there. And that God won't mind you, because God knows I love my wife. And all these other women don't mean anything to me. And so that won't matter to him. The Pope is saying that's not going to be true. We will continue with this again, because and we'll get back to this, but we'll take a break right now and sit with this big distinction of thought in understanding morality, and come back and get some of your questions and some emails and other questions, so please stay with us. Thank you, welcome back. Let's start off with a caller. Hello, Michael? Michael, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Hi, where are you from?
from Johnstown, Pennsylvania, Father.
Oh, great to have you on. And what's your question?
Father, first, it's a privilege to speak to you.
Thank you.
I have a two-part question, Father. I'm reading a book about, it's titled Get Us Out of Here. It's by Nikki E-I-T-Z. I wonder if you're familiar with that.
No, I haven't heard of that book. Sorry.
It's about a woman, Maria Sema. She claims to have contact with the poor souls from purgatory.
Yeah. No, I don't know anything about that at all. Sorry.
I just wanted to know if I was wasting my time reading it, because she's answering a lot of questions I have about purgatory.
Mm-hmm.
My son recently passed, and
I'm so sorry.
Well, thank you. I'm not so sure that he was the model Catholic, but I know he was a good boy. But I just want to know what are we doing everything, my wife and I, to assure that to get him to heaven? What else can we do? We have the masses, we do the novenas, and we are good Catholics.
Yeah.
What kind of person? What can people do with other souls to help people get to heaven? I think that's my main question.
Sure. Michael, again, I'm very sorry for the loss of your son, and certainly I'll keep him, and we pray for the repose of the souls of people like yourself who lost relatives or other viewers. We do that on every day at the daily Mass that we broadcast. And this is something that we want to very much assure you of our prayers. What I would recommend is a series of small little books about purgatory. I don't know this other person. I don't know anything about them. I can't comment one way or the other. But Susan Tassoni has written a number of books, some of which have daily prayers for the souls in purgatory and daily comments by the saints who write about purgatory. I would urge, you can get those on EWTN Religious Catalog, EWTNRC.com. And, I've gone through those, of course, the older you get, the more people you know who pass away. And, to pray for them is something that I do on a regular basis. And Susan Tassoni's insights into purgatory and what she presents from the saints is the best help. You and your wife are doing exactly what you can do and should do, what all of us should do. And one other thing, too, that I may recommend, take a look at what Pope Francis has asked all of us to do during this year of mercy, namely, read Dante's Divine Comedy. You can find a number of English copies of it, but the first part is called the Inferno, and then the Purgatorio. And they're really, really good for reflection, and I would urge you to do that as well as Susan Tassoni's materials. That'll be a source of deep thought and comfort. Okay? And again, I'll be praying for you and your son too. We have Merle on the line. Hello, Merle.
Yes, sir.
Where are you from?
I'm from Akron, Ohio, sir.
Akron. Great. Good to have you here. And what is your question?
Okay, my question is, because lately, as a theologian, I've been debating a lot of preterists. Do you know what that is?
No. What do they mean by that?
Okay, basically a preterist is somebody who believes that everything has been literally fulfilled from Genesis to Revelations. Now, as a Messianic Jew, I can tell you, firsthand experience, that that has not happened. An example, Ezekiel chapter 37, verse 15, and so on down the line. And
let me add this to you too, Merle. As a lifelong Catholic, I would agree with you that not everything has been fulfilled. So yeah, I think you're right.
The reason why I'm asking is because it was founded by a Catholic Jesuit priest named Luis del Alcázar. He was born in 1554. He passed on in 1613.
Yeah.
The first preterist school was founded the next year in 1614, and I'm wondering why the Catholic Church let him do that.
Well, you know, I don't. One of the things, where did you come across? It would be Alcázar. Where did you come across this guy in his writings? Is it something recent?
Well, I ran into him actually online. Not him, obviously. Into preterists.
They didn't have online back then.
Yeah, right. I chat online a lot live, and some people that are preterists. So I researched it and I found it. And Luis del Alcázar, he entered the Jesuit order in 1568 when he was basically around 14 years old.
Yeah.
Was ordained as a Jesuit priest 10 years later, around 1578, and on from there is how I researched it. And then I watched another debate between a very famous preterist named Don Preston and Messianic Rabbi Michael Brown to learn more about it.
I tell you what I'm going to do is try to look this up a little bit more, okay? Because the Jesuits don't teach that in our schools. And this is a very obscure Jesuit. I've been a Jesuit for 48 years, and I've never heard of this guy. And I suspect that the church gave a judgment on him contrary to his doctrine. But I will check into it, okay? And I will try to find out just a little bit more and give a report, because this is very odd, and the church does not teach that everything has been fulfilled. Obviously, the second coming of Christ hasn't happened yet. So not everything has happened yet. So I'll check more into it. But thank you very much, Mo, for alerting me to that. Sometimes the stuff online gets a little carried away. All right, we'll get back to you soon. Here's a question from Carl by email. Father Mitch, could someone say that conscience is subjective and the law is objective? I also have a question that is more important from a practical point of view. Can the conscience be educated? Carl. Carl, a couple things. Here would be a better way to phrase it. The individual conscience belongs to the individual subject. And by subject, we mean a person who has intellect and free will. And so in that sense, it is subjective in the technical sense of subjective, meaning that it belongs to a personal subject. However, as you do say, natural law is objective, and God works within the human conscience to try and speak to it. And the human conscience very much says that, it resonates with it, with the natural law. And and your question, can the conscience be educated? Absolutely. A lot of people have their conscience misformed or malformed. The classic would be in the story, to use a novel, but in Dickens' tale, in which I believe it's Oliver Twist, where Fagin malforms young boys to become thieves. So you can malform, but you can then correct that. And this classic example would be that somebody would say that, for instance, as a thief, they don't want to be robbed. So they can start, even from their own conscience, thinking through, and they can reform their thinking in their conscience. And that is exactly why we teach morality to people, to help form their conscience, so they don't have to learn by making a lot of mistakes that are unnecessary, since they've been made in the past. So yeah, no, that'd be the case. We have another caller. Hello, Barbara.
Yes, thank you, Father, for taking my call.
Where were you from?
I have a very difficult question here.
Yeah.
And I'm very concerned that it does not in any way throw any negative light on our Blessed Holy Mother Catholic Church, because there's so much misinformation. So I'll try to get to the point. A while back, I saw on a Protestant program on TV, and this individual man is extremely vehemently anti-Catholic. Totally, and you can even, and he started to show on the screen so-called some of the writings of our early fathers and St. Jerome and St. Augustine, claiming that Catholic Church is guilty of starting anti-Semitism. And he would quote. Now, I took a class on Catholic Bible class, and one time we studied the book The Fathers by Pope Benedict XVI, and he would quote Origen and some of his writings, and St. John Chrysostom, his writings, and he just went on, and Tertullian, and as I repeat, St. Jerome, St. Augustine, and then he had it on the screen.
Right.
And I'm very upset about that.
All right, now let me ask you this, Barbara. Did he give you, or put on the screen, the specific citations where these quotes were from?
No, I did not see that. I didn't see that. But
Here's the reason I ask is this. I wonder whether he got this from a man named Loraine Boettner, Boettner. My suspicion is that he got those quotes from Loraine Boettner. I can't guarantee it. Loraine Boettner was a major falsifier of information about the Catholic Church. And when we, for instance, when we're going through these documents by Pope John Paul, and the Pope cites Vatican II, we give you the paragraph so you can go and check it out, right? This guy did not give the citations so you can go and check. And that's something that already puts up a red flag for me, that scholarship requires you to be able to check. Now, I would want to find out where those statements are from. Now, I do know this. Both Jews and Catholics were in a lot of heated debate in the patristic period. So, for instance, in the Talmud, there's some statements about Christ and the Virgin Mary that are insulting, because the insults were mutual. There was a lot of tension between the communities, and I would want to see, but the specific content. But for instance, with St. Jerome secretly studied with a rabbi to learn Hebrew, especially for the book of Ecclesiastes and the book of Job, which are the two most difficult to translate. Especially Job is very difficult to translate. And he didn't just, meet with him once. He met with him for years, and they had a good friendship. I'm just on the basis of St. Jerome's relationship with at least one rabbi, I think it was more than one rabbi over the years. I don't think that he had that mentality. But try to see if you can get a copy of some of those quotes. And you may even contact Catholic Answers. Catholic Answers out in California has studied Loraine Bettner's falsifications in great detail. For instance, to give an example, he said the Catholic Church put the Bible on the Index of Forbidden Books in 1226 or something like that. Here was the problem. The index didn't exist for another 300 years. You can't put it on the index when it doesn't exist. But that we'll try to look into more of that. Here from Gloria in Texas. Father Pacwa, your show on conscience was great. The conscience, as you said, is the authoritative voice of God instructing us. But if the person is raised as a communist or atheist, etc., does the conscience die? No, it does not. That's one of the great things about conscience, is that it remains within the atheist and begins to bother them. In a discussion with David DeLeiden that I had not long ago, he's the man that did the videos on Planned Parenthood. One of the things that he was sharing with me is that he says about 80% of the abortionists to whom he spoke had deep misgivings about that. Only about 20% were without conscience on that. Many of them, even though they were doing thousands of abortions, they had deep misgivings about it morally. Why? Because their own conscience was still alive. And our response for those abortionists and for atheists and communists is to pray for them that their conscience be stirred to transform them. And we've come across cases of Dr. Nathanson, who did 65,000 abortions, but his conscience worked within him, and he ended up not only rebuking it, writing against it, but he ended up and became a Catholic. Also, another email here from Mary. Father Mitch, I fear that my children and grandchildren do not have properly formed consciences. The culture has such a strong pull against goodness. What can I do? Well, Mary, one of the things you can do is that since conscience is a function of the intellect, a function of the mind, what you can do, better than just tell them, oh, you shouldn't do this, they won't listen, I know. But if you say, exactly, pose it as a question, what makes your fornication or your theft or lying or whatever else you might do, but usually it's the sexual realm, what makes that so good? Well, I feel like it. I know. Now, when somebody cheats on you, how does that make you feel? In other words, start to use good questions to probe. And then don't be ready to jump in with the answer. Give them the questions and force them to think about their behavior. And then they can start to form their conscience on other lines. It's amazing, some of the stuff that is going on today. We might talk about it in the future. All right, we are flat out of time. May the Lord bless you and keep you and cause his face to shine upon you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. And again, we strongly urge you to keep us in between your gas bill, electric bill, and cable bill. From the very beginning, Mother Angelica established this network to be supported by you. That's why we don't have advertising and such things. We depend on you and God stirring within you to keep this ministry going. God bless you, and thank you for your generosity.